Hello everybody, Bill Sky, the Linux guy here, and we're going to do a fourth video, and this one will be on how to update your operating system, keep it up to date, get all those security fixes in, as well as searching around for other packages and things that you might like to install on your Linux, all for free. No cost, all automated very, very nicely. Now we're going to do this on a Debian Linux. I'm going to use Mint Linux, which is an offshoot of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an offshoot of Debian. And we're also going to do it on Alma Linux, which is a Red Hat offshoot. In my installation video, #1 video, I did CentOS. You can do it on that if you want. You can do it on Red Hat. It pretty much all has the same commands. So let's just jump into it. Let's do the Debian install first, and then, or the update, and maybe application install, and then we'll do Alma. Okay, so you can see how we've got my Mint Linux up here and running, and this will work exactly the same as on Ubuntu, and there's a couple of ways that you can do that. I'm going to go to the Start menu, and I'm just going to type in Update, and you can see that there's an Update Manager, and right now it says, okay, it's the first time I've ran it. No, I don't want to do anything, and then it says a new version of the Update Managers is available. Well, the Update Manager in Ubuntu and also in Mint, it is an actual app. So we're going through an awful lot of effort here just to get things set up. So instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a terminal. And I'm going to execute the commands on the command line because it's just easier that way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to do this as a super user. If I just try to do apt update, well, that's interesting. It shouldn't have done that. Apt update. Notice it's asking me for a password. My user ID must be part of the super user list, or the list, or the group of user IDs that are listed as super users. And if it's not, I can type my password in until I'm blue in the face, and it'll say it won't work. So you've got to do that. Now, if you're not part of the super user list, you can switch user to root. And root is the most important user ID on the entire system. I do not recommend that you do this, but you can do it. And it's assuming that you set up a root password, which in this case we didn't. So we cannot actually get into root because I haven't set it up. So I do know that when I installed Mint Linux, I told it to make my user ID an administrator. So I'm going to say sudo, which means super user do something, apt update. And it's going to ask me for my password. So what it's doing right now is it's going out on the internet and it's downloading all of the software catalogs, the most recent software catalogs in my system to download what all the updates are going to be. So after I do that, I'm going to write sudo apt upgrade. And it's going to upgrade 638 megabytes of applications. Now the reason it's going to do all that is simply because this is a brand new install, and there's just been a lot of updates since that install. So I'm going to say yes, and it's going to go through here and update. Now, while this is going on, let's take a look at Red Hat, or let's take a look at Alma Linux to see how we can do that. Okay, we're back. We're at Alma Linux. Let's take a look at what we can do in the GUI with Alma Linux. And I'm going to go up here. I'm going to type update. Well, Alma Linux, you can go to software. This is the first time I've been to this particular operating system screen. I'm going to go to updates, and it shows OS updates, but it doesn't really show you what it's going to be updating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. And you could do it that way if you want, but I'm going to go here. I'm going to close it. I'm going to go to terminal, and on Red Hat Linux, CentOS, Fedora, or Alma, it's the DNF command. So if I type DNF update, it says this command has to be run with super user privileges. So you have to make sure that your user ID has been set up as a super user. A lot of times it's in the wheel group, but we'll be talking about that when we talk about super users in the next video. So to do this, I'm going to type, I could actually say switch user to root, type in the password I gave to the root during installation, and then I could run it there. Beware of doing this. You almost never want to log in as root unless it's an emergency situation, unless you've really screwed something up. it makes me nervous just sitting there in the root user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit. Now, now why am I so happy I'm out of root? Because I could actually completely wipe out the entire operating system with a single command using root. And you don't want to do that. So you always want to use the sudo superuser DNF update. It's going to ask me for my password. Now, if you don't have root access, if you don't have superuser access in your Linux ID, you have to contact the administrator to see if they'll give it to you. In this case, it's going to update it 190 megabytes. And this is an awful lot like apt. However, you don't have to say sudo apt update first. You just say DNF update, and it automatically downloads all the catalogs for you. And that's one of the things that people really like about Red Hat and Alma is that you don't have as many commands. So while this is updating, let's go back to my Mint Debian Linux and see where it is. All right, my Debian Linux, or I should say my Mint Linux, is done updating. And it looks like it updated everything. It actually even updated the kernel, which is the base part of the operating system. But something I forgot to show you, if I scroll all the way up and then just down a little bit after doing the sudo apt update, it says if you would like to list the packages that are going to be updated, you could run the sudo apt list -- upgradable, and that will list the number or the types of the applications that will be updated, and then you can pick the updates that you want. I'll put those commands into the description of this video, into the notes on this video, but that is something else that you can do before you actually do the update. So there you go. Now, whenever I do a big system update like this, I always reboot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say sudo reboot and let that reboot. And the Alma Linux is all ready to go. It's ready. We're just going to go ahead and say sudo reboot. You may not need the sudo, but we're going to say sudo reboot anyway. Now let's go find some packages to install. Now we could easily do this with the GUI. So I'm going to say, I don't know. Oh my goodness! I'm going to type software. Here we go. Software manager. And every distribution is a little bit different, but in Mint's situation, it's called Software Manager. Now look how long it's taking us to do this. It's going through and it's checking things out. Again, the terminal is so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal, and what I want to do is I want to search for a package. Let's say I want to install GCC. Let's say I want to install the C compiler. So I'm going to say sudo apt search GCC. And it shows an awful lot of stuff here. These are all the things that you can install. And there's an awful lot. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top. And there it is right there. So I can just say sudo apt install GCC if I like. Now that the GUI is ready to go, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to type C and press enter. And it kind of gives me the same type of a display, but no, where's GCC? Oh, there it is right there. So I can also install it from there. And right now it looks like it's already been installed. That's interesting. That might be a default installation. Whenever the operating system installs, it also always installs GCC, which I think is a great idea. However, one thing that you need to remember is that you always want to install the development tools. I don't think I've ever seen a Linux where all of the development tools, all the base operating system development tools were not installed. So on Debian, that means Ubuntu, Mint Linux, Pop, I would say sudo apt install build essential. And what this is going to do is this is going to install about 65 megabytes of developer tools that will include C, C++, it'll include the linker, it'll even include the GDB debugger. So if you want to see if they're installed, I'll type GCC. There it is, no input files, G++. There it is, no input files. LD is the linker, AS is an assembler, and it's locked up because it's waiting for more input. Let's see if I type version. Yep, it shows me that the assembler is sitting there. I'm going to type GDB. Wow, look at that. All with a single command, I was able to install everything. Okay, so that's how we've installed the basic development. This operating system right now, this Linux, is ready to go. We could go ahead and install. I'm going to go ahead and say sudo apt search. One of my favorite editors is Genie. So I'm going to see if Genie's out there. Oh, lots of Genie stuff. Yep, there's my Genie. If I'm going to go here and type Genie, it isn't yet installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sudo apt install Genie. Genie is my favorite editor. Now, it's asking me if I'm sure I want to install it. To avoid that, just put a -y at the end. And it just goes ahead and installs it. Let's do Genie. I don't remember if it's add-ons or plugins. Nope. So notice it said it couldn't find it. So I believe it's plugins. There it goes, and now it's installing it. So now after that is installed, I can go down here to the Start menu, type Genie, and there's my Genie editor right there. I can open it up, and that's my favorite editor. I can also start it from the command line. I'm putting an ampersand at the end because that means start Genie and then free up the terminal for me. So I can go ahead and still type in commands if I want. Let me do that without the ampersand and you'll see the big difference. I'm pretty much stuck. I can't type anything in. It's letting me type, but it's not doing anything with it. So when I close Genie, it looks like it then tries to execute those commands. So the ampersand at the end is kind of touchy. Let's go ahead and install the development tools on Alma Linux next. Okay, now I'm back on Alma Linux. I've updated the operating system, but something I didn't mention when I talked about the Debian update is that you want to make sure you update all the catalogs first. So when you do a Debian update, you want to make sure before you install anything that you do a sudo apt update. Always do that. Always, always do that. Well, do you have to do that on Red Hat or CentOS or Alma? Not really, but I do it anyway. I'll say sudo dnf update just to make sure that I've got everything up to date. Make sure all the catalogs, it says nothing to do. Awesome. So now let's go ahead and install all of the development tools. So it's a little bit different than on Debian. I'm going to say sudo dnf group install development tools. And it says, well, do you want to do it? Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to put a -y at the end here, and it just does it. But so by putting a -y at the end of that command, it just does it. It's actually kind of nice. And we're going to go ahead and let that finish. It's about 500 megabytes. There's an awful lot of development tools that need to be installed. And I think the reason is because Alma Linux doesn't by default install development tools just as, the way that it did it on Mint Linux or Debian. All right, looks like Alma's done with the install. Now, let's go ahead and type in some commands. GCC, all right, great. G++, awesome. Let's do LD, very good. GDB, that's installed. AS version, that's installed. Awesome. So we've got an awful lot of stuff, all the development tools that we need, including the header files for the Linux operating system, the kernel, which is needed by a lot of applications when they're doing the installation. Now, one thing you want to do on Red Hat type operating systems, as well as Debian, is after you do this, I always like to do a sudo dnf autoremove. And what that does is that it deletes any of the temporary files, any of the old files that you don't need anymore. In this case, it's not a problem. If I want to display all of the applications currently installed, I'm going to say sudo dnf list install. And it shows all of the applications that we currently have installed. Now, if I'm looking for specific like GCC, so let's say if I want to look at a specific one, I'm going to pipe the output of that. If you notice, there's just tons of data. And we'll be talking about the piping in a little while, but what I'm going to, or I should say in a future video. But the vertical line means I want to pipe it to another program called grep, and I want to see if GCC is installed. And there you go. You can see that instead of it showing me those hundreds or thousands of files, or installed packages, it actually showed me the ones that it had installed. Let's say if I want to do the same, I want to say G++ is installed. Well, it doesn't look like it's installed, but when I say G++, it's there. And I believe it's because G++ is actually part of GCC. So the G++, the C++ compiler, isn't actually its own thing. It's actually part of the GCC compiler. Something else that I really like is NASM installed. Oh, the network assembler is not installed. We're going to show you how to do that from source code very, very soon. Let's see if the AS compiler is installed. Well, here's a problem with doing that type of thing. grep is going to search for any character. It's going to look for AS anywhere in the output. So even though it's all of these different packages that have the letters AS, if I go all the way to the top, yeah, I don't even see it there. So sometimes this works really well and sometimes it doesn't. Now let's go back to Debian and see how it is set up, or how you can see all of the different applications installed in that. Believe it or not, it's exactly the same. So I'm going to say sudo apt list installed. And you can see it's exactly the same thing. I can grep, see if GCC is installed, and it is. GCC is installed. Okay, so that's how you can keep your system updated. I really suggest you run those commands just about any time you log in. I sometimes do it 3 or 4 times a day. Yeah, unbelievable. I do that because I'm very OCD. Oh, I shouldn't say OCD. I'm very anal retentive about security fixes. And with Linux becoming such a popular, or it is the most popular server operating systems, even though it's very, very secure, hackers are still going to try to get in there. So I would really recommend that you go ahead and do those updates all the time. You can do searches using the software catalog, using the GUI tool, or you can do it if you know the name of your program that you're interested in doing, like we did in Genie. You can do that as well. Hope to see you at our next video.